Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of The Good, the Bad, and the Bible. My name is Rogan Freewolf, and today we are in Deuteronomy chapter 22. It's going to be a roller coaster ride for sure. Not just with good things in the chapter, but also some very, very, very terrible things that we are going to look at and discuss, and there will be some things that I think a lot of people have never noticed in this chapter before, much less in the Bible in its entirety. And in fact, we've covered some pretty terrible chapters in the Bible, some pretty terrible passages, but this is definitely going to be right up there with one of the worst today. So grab your weed, because mine is charging. I decided to try one of these carts that are like they're supposed to be disposable, and I asked them, well, do you ever have to charge them up? Because I noticed it has a charge hole in it, and they said, no, you probably shouldn't have to. Well, I got plenty of weed left and I have to charge, so that's what I get for not depending on good old-fashioned herb. So, you'll have to start without me today, although actually I'm ahead of you, of course, because I've already been smoking, and my thing's dead. So, let's dive right into it. Oh, and of course, because we're dealing with such a terrible subject today, let's start it off on a positive note with a kitty cat. There, now y'all can feel good about, get the good feelings going, because, well, the chapter's going to start out fairly positive too, so there's that. But, there's nothing as pure as a kitty. Ain't that right, buddy? Alright. You can go. So here in the beginning of chapter 22, we have it's purely positive, nothing but purely positive right out the gate. Thou shalt not see thy brother's ox or his sheep go astray, and hide thyself from them. Thou shalt in any case bring them again unto thy brother. And if thy brother be not nigh unto thee, or if thou know him not, then thou shalt bring it unto thine house, and it shall be with thee until thy brother seek after it, and thou shalt restore it to him again. So what is this saying? Well, straight up, if someone's animal goes missing, their pet, their farm animal, and you see it and you know it's missing, you are supposed to take it. You are supposed to return it to the person who lost it. Even if, and this is what verse 2 is pointing out, even if you don't know the person. And I'm all for Israel being turned into a massive lost and found place. Fantastic. Where no one ever loses anything or anything ever gets stolen. But, how is God going to enforce that and make sure no one ever decides to keep this animal for themselves? And plus, what if the person who comes across it doesn't have the capability of taking care of that animal? It even says, if you don't know whose it is, keep it and take care of it yourself until that person who lost it comes looking for it. That's a positive gesture. Sure, I'm for that. But, if you can't afford to take care of it, I don't know, are they supposed to just pass it around till someone who can take care of it takes it? And then, that's an extra strain on them. What if they're barely getting by as is? And they can't afford to keep an animal. They're just supposed to keep on passing these animals around until they all circulate and end up in some wealthy person's farm? And then they end up with all the animals that everyone goes to. I mean, maybe that would make things a little bit easier. I don't know. They're not really saying how to orchestrate this, but you know, who's to say no one's going to steal these animals? Who's to say everyone can take care of them? I'm all for it. It's positive. It sounds great, but there's some issues that are not really being discussed here. And then it goes on to say, in like manner, this is actually a little bit harder to go wrong with, but it says, in like manner shalt thou do with his ass. Donkey. Old-fashioned way of saying donkey. I know it's hilarious, but yeah. In like manner, so shalt thou do with his ass. And so shalt thou do with his raiment, his clothing, and with all lost things of thy brothers, which he hath lost. Yeah, brothers, so Israelites. Wonder if that means that if they know it's from a non-Israelite, keep that shit. You don't have to return it. That's not mentioned here, I'm just saying. They have a way of treating their own people a certain way and the rest of the world not so equally. And we have another re-emphasis of that here. And it's kind of funny how it repeats this little phrase multiple times. Thou mayest not hide thyself. It's like I'm imagining these Israelites seeing these animals, you know, wandering around loose, or you know, finding clothes on the ground, or finding, you know, finding these lost items belonging to other people, and them just like, oh God, and then hiding behind a tree. I don't want responsibility. It says it multiple times. Verse 1, verse 3, and verse 4. Thou shalt not see thy brother's ass or his ox fall down by the way, and hide thyself from them. Thou shalt surely help him to lift them up again. So, if you see a fellow Israelite's animal that's having an issue with the burden or whatever, you're supposed to help them. You're supposed to help them with kind of whatever issue you're seeing your fellow brothers undergoing. You're not supposed to avoid helping them. It doesn't say what to do if you have back problems. Maybe maybe a clause was added later. It's like, oh, you just have to, you know, call for someone else to come over and help if you have back problems. But it's not mentioned here. So you better jump in and lend a hand. They probably made an exception for people with back problems. I'm sure they did. No, they're crazy, but they're not completely insane, you know. I'm sure. But you know, depends on how tyrannical Moses was. We don't really know, because he's dead. But he definitely had some wacky ideas to have come up with a lot of these. And then we come to the first really problematic verse of the chapter. Verse 5. It's just rammed in here with no context. You can look it up, chapter 22 in Deuteronomy, verse 5. I just read to you pretty much all the verses before, just 4 verses, and then afterwards it's a completely different subject from verse 6 and on. So what's going on in verse 5? That's just kind of stuck in here between the cheeks of these verses. Well, the women shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment, for all that do so are abomination unto the Lord thy God. So for those who do not understand Old King James, it's basically saying women are not to wear men's clothing, and men are not to wear women's clothing. We don't really know why. We just know that it upsets God. He thinks it's an abomination. Well, this version of God, to be specific. And when I came across this verse, I realized something this most recent time, and that is that there are a lot of verses that people actually use to say that the Bible is homophobic. And I will share two of them with you. They are I think, honestly, there are only three. Because I've looked at all the other ones that are mentioned, and the other ones, like from the New Testament, and you could make an argument about the others in the Old Testament, to be honest. But these ones right here, and I'm pretty sure, I can't remember if I'm assuming they were not repeated, because they weren't repeated in the research that I found online when I asked for all the homophobic Bible verses. Bibles. That would be all of them. But the chief verses that I found were Leviticus 18:22 and also Leviticus 20 verse 13. Both of those say, as they're translated into English, that men are not to lie with men as men lie with women. That's roughly how it's stated. It doesn't say have sex or penetrated, but you kind of get the gist of it. For some reason, some people will argue, well, it's cultural, it means something different, it's only referring to pedophiles, which that's a whole nother mess that is not taking other Hebrew books into account that are not included in the Bible, but are included into certain versions of Judaism. I'll let you explore that rabbit hole yourself. Yeah, that is some very murky and dark waters too. They have their own little dark pocket of beliefs as well. I'm not saying they're all like that. Again, got to reiterate that for the crazies out there. There are many different versions of every religion out there, including Judaism, Christianity, all that. And there are versions that say, that according to these verses, that homosexuality is wrong, that it is an abomination. They use Sodom and Gomorrah as also an excuse to say that God hates it. And honestly, I think that makes a more sensible approach. I'm not saying that I agree with them that the true God actually thinks that way. I'm just saying it from how we look at it at face value in the scripture, especially when we take these three verses into account: Leviticus 18:22, chapter 20 verse 13, and Deuteronomy 22 verse 5. I mean, this verse in Deuteronomy, it's straight up calling out cross-dressers. It's literally calling cross-dressers an abomination. And literally anyone who does that. It's like, how it doesn't get much more anti-gay than that. I don't know how this verse does not end up in the list that I generally see online, but I feel like this is one of the biggest ones. It makes absolutely no sense to me how Christians are able to say that God is somehow fine with homosexuality. Even like the Pope, like saying that, oh, God's fine with people who are gay, just not with people who perform the act. Like, what? then why did he make them that way? Why did he allow such beings to exist? You know, what if God didn't make us perfect like he did back in Garden of Eden, you know? What if he just made us as we are, as imperfect beings? What if that's just the way the universe is, and we're just all naturally imperfect? Something to think about. And God doesn't even really say what to do with these people. He may say it in the other two verses that I mentioned, but he definitely does not here. He doesn't say what to do with the women that dress like guys and the guys who dress like women. He doesn't say. He just says, don't do it, they're an abomination. Or that action is an abomination. And then he just jumps right off into, now we're going to talk about birds. Yeah, you heard me right. Birds. Bird is the word. Verse 6, I'm not joking. Follow along if you don't believe me. If a bird's nest chanced to be before you in the way, in a tree or on the ground, whether you are sitting or where there are young ones, there are eggs, and the mother, I'm also paraphrasing some of this, because in the way this is wording it, it's calling the mother a dam, D-A-M, but it's the mother of the eggs. And it's saying if the mother is sitting there or upon the eggs, you should not take the mother with the eggs. But you shall in any wise let the mother go, take the young to thee, that it may be well with thee, and that thou mayest prolong thy life, thy days. So basically God is saying, if you come across a nest, and you're hungry, and there are chicks or eggs in the nest, take them. But don't take the mother if it's there, because that's bad luck. Essentially. That's essentially what he's saying. So, is it good advice? Well, I mean, I checked it off as positive because it's like, I don't know, it seems like it's supposed to have a good purpose behind it. I mean, it's superstitious, so to speak. Definitely. Like, there is no actual, like, natural reason given as to why that should be done. And maybe it applies better to these particular type of birds that live in the Israeli region. Because not all birds breed the same. They're not all churning out eggs overnight like chickens. Some of them only do it in certain seasons. Some of them only do it once a year. So some of them are very periodic. So yeah, you've got the whole variety. I don't know how this applies or how it helps the environment at all, but at least they're letting the mother go. I mean, it seems like a conservative sort of merciful hunting technique, I guess. Merciful foraging. I'm not really sure how to put it. Yeah, don't get on my case about animals' rights and crap, because I love animals, but I also believe in the food chain and all that jazz. So, is this something that anyone should follow? I don't think it really matters, to be honest, but at least has a positive connotation. I can't really say there's anything that really irks my conscience here. So it's like, sure, go ahead, do it, whatever. I've got no beef with that. And then these next few verses are just kind of spitballing random advice, and it gets kind of, I mean, it's not bad advice, I'll give you that, but just listen. When thou buildest a new house, and then thou shalt make a battlement for thy roof, basically like a railing, that thou bring not blood upon thine house, if any man fall from thence. So why are they saying to put railings on rooftops? Well, because in the Middle East, I don't know if they still do a lot of them like this today, but back in the day, they would have more flat roofs where they could actually go up and sleep on the roof at night if it got hot in the house. And with the roofs being flat, of course, you would think anyone would put a railing up there. It's like, if you build a balcony, make sure you put a railing on it. Okay. Yeah. Duh. Okay. Why wouldn't we? I'm pretty sure we could have figured that one out, Yahweh. It's great advice, but I'm not seeing how it's necessary. Like, since when was God into construction? I mean, he's making it about, so that if anyone falls, it's not your fault. You should have had a railing up there. It was like, or, I mean, why can't it be, why does it, what if the person was drunk or, of their own volition and they stumbled up there and they fell off, or they, I understand, yes, we should have a railing up there anyways, but what if someone, wants the free will to not have a railing on top of their flat roof house that they can have stairs up to anyways? What if they want to be purposefully stupid, and someone else being purposefully stupid goes up there and gets themselves killed? Are you really going to blame both people? I mean, shouldn't the fault be at least split 50-50? At least. What were they doing up there if there was no railing? I don't know. There should be a railing anyways, but it's, you would think you shouldn't have to put that in the Bible, It's like if God told Moses to put in, when they invent electricity, make sure they have breakers, or, make sure they only handle them with rubber gloves, or whatever safety features that they need. It's like, yeah, duh. Hey, when you go rock climbing, make sure you have a harness and rope on. Make sure your thing is properly secured. Yeah, duh. There's a procedure to these things. We figured it out from messing up before. We don't need a deity to tell us these straightforward basic things. But he's going to do it again 2 more times. Thou shalt not sow thy vineyard with diverse seeds, lest the fruit of thy seed which thou hast sown and the fruit of thy vineyard be defiled. Basically, don't mix your plants when you make a farm. Now, I'm no expert at farming, but I know certain plants that you can, there are some plants that you can grow with others. Don't ask me which ones. I had relatives that did gardening and some farming, so I have some sense of what I'm talking about, but I'm honest enough to admit I don't know what plants they are. But some plants you can grow together. Like, yeah, obviously, we're going to plant our shit in rows. It's going to be organized. I mean, sure, maybe he's trying to give them basic farming advice. But shouldn't they know that from Egypt? Don't they have farms and crops out there. I mean, maybe Moses learned this from the Egyptians and passed it on. I feel like that would make a bit more sense than it coming from God. And then we get even more kind of, I don't know, good advice, but we didn't really need it. Verse 10. Thou shalt not plow with an ox and an ass together. Now, you guys know how big a donkey is? You know, ass, donkey. Do you know how big an ox is? Now imagine them side by side. You know, ox is like a cow, but maybe stockier, maybe a little shorter, but definitely stockier. They're built for strength. They're built for size generally. They do come in all kinds of sizes, but they are generally big. Donkeys, they're not even a pony. They're smaller than a pony. Not like a miniature donkey, not like from Shrek. Like Shrek was like a miniature donkey. A little bit bigger than that. But still, this tiny excuse of not even a pony next to a big-ass ox. Who in their right mind would put them together to plow a field? And if you know anything about oxen and donkeys, oxen are more easily trained. Donkeys are very stubborn. Why would you put two such opposite kind of animals together? How dumb does Yahweh/Moses think the people of Israel are? So much so that it's gotta go into the basic instructions before leaving Earth, the almighty holy book. We gotta have it. Don't plow a field with an ox and an ass next together. Okay, so what if we get a mini ox and a beefed up donkey that happens to be well mannered? Maybe we raise the donkey and the ox together, and we've genetically prepared them to be about the same size. Would that be an abomination to plow the field if it worked? How bad would it be if we somehow successfully made that happen? Because humans have been able to pull off some crazy shit. Dogs and cats can get along if you raise them together properly. And now we do all kinds of crazy stuff with science. Who's to say we couldn't find a way to plow a field with a donkey and an ox? Why is it such a big deal? Yeah, obviously people who don't have the science and the technology and all that are going to do that. No one in their right mind is going to try to put a round peg in a square hole. We might try it when we're younger and dumber, but experienced people who just have even basic knowledge, you don't even have to know how to run a farm. I don't know how to run a farm, and I know putting an ox and a donkey together is like putting a square peg in a round hole. Vice versa. You can't fucking do it. if you don't know what you're doing, if you haven't prepared for it right, you can't just slap any old donkey with any old ox and go out and start plowing a farm. When you know what they're made of, when you know how big they are, when you know their size comparison, when you know their attitude comparison, working with a donkey is nothing like working with an ox. And I'm pretty sure the average individual knew that back then. Why the did we need that advice from God in the Bible? Why? Other people are like, oh, it's symbology. And you know what they'll tell you it's symbology of, at least in the context of Christianity that I was raised in? Christians not marrying non-Christians. Basically marrying outside the cult. Having an unequally yoked, an unequal yoke, that's what they would call it, because what you put on the ox, the pair of oxen when you go to plow the field, they call it a yoke. It's a big ass harness. I don't know why they call it a yoke, but that's just what they did back then. And then God goes even further, and I don't even know how to. I don't know how to call this good or bad, because he's talking about clothes. He is straight up talking about clothes, but I underlined it in the negative. Because honestly, there is no reason given. As usual, no reason given. And also no punishment mentioned for disobeying these particular rules. What are the rules? 11 and 12. Thou shalt not wear a garment of diverse sorts, as of woolen and linen together. Thou shalt make thee fringes upon 4 quarters of thy vesture, wherewith thou coverest thyself. And then we talk about sex and marriage right after that. That's it. That is all we get on clothing in this particular portion. There's, no reason as to why. Some people will say it has to do with vibration. I don't even know, to be honest. Because it's like something to do with the thread count. So many threads and certain type of materials give off certain vibrational energies. I don't know. I have no way of confirming this, but there is no punishment mentioned. There is no reason why it's said it should be done here. It's just do it. Just do it. Don't ask why, just do it. Do this, don't do that. I'm not going to tell you why. I'm not going to give you a reason to be fearful of doing it or a reason to want to do it. I'm just saying do it. That's what we have here. Because that's how God is sometimes. Yeah, we're at that part. We are at that part. And I'm actually just going to paraphrase what's going on from verse 13 to 19. Because that would be so much easier. With the way things are written here, I don't think it's fair to take it completely at face value. Just because of the wording, and I'm trying to keep it simple for you guys, because the old King James is kind of ridiculous. I'll let you know what I'm referring to a little bit. Like right out the gate, it says, if any man take a wife and go in unto her, as in to have sex, and hate her, like yeah, and that is just that verse alone. Yeah, it's very, very strong language. And yeah, they did not always have a great way of translating things from Hebrew to Latin to English. So this is probably not the greatest translation here, but that is why I am just going to paraphrase what's happening. So, a couple gets married, and the husband goes in and discovers, oh, my wife is not a virgin. Because for some reason, that is a big deal in this culture, in this cult. It is such a big deal that I'm going to need some weed. So he goes in and he accuses his wife of not being a virgin, because that is a tremendously huge deal. And he brings her before the elders of the city and is accusing her of not being a virgin. And the elders then look at the fuck rag. Literally, they have a rag, or a cloth, that they put down where they have sex on the night of their consummation, and the elders look at it, and if there is blood on it, then that means, well, she was a virgin, and then the man has to pay a fine. I'm not quite sure who he's paying. Oh, right, he's paying it to the dad. He's paying it to the dad because he made a false accusation, a very serious one, and because of that he has to pay 100 shekels, which is a lot of money. You can look that up, but it's a lot. It's a lot. I'm pretty sure it's somewhere over $1,000 dollars, just to be clear, somewhere over there. But anyways, 100 shekels of silver, and give it to the father of the damsel, because he hath brought an evil name, because he brought a bad rumor upon his daughter. And he is not allowed to ever divorce her. Literally, ever. They're stuck married for the rest of their lives. I highlighted it in green because the guy got in trouble for lying, and at least they had a punishment for him. But it kind of sucks that, the woman had to go through all of this false accusation and is now stuck with this man. Oh yeah, also, of course, there's not going to be any say of what the daughter wants in any of this, of course, because they don't do that here. But what happens if the husband accuses her of not having her virginity on their wedding night, and they go to the elders and they discover that there's no blood on the fuck rag? What happens then? I'll read that to you. Verse 21. Then they shall bring out the damsel, the girl, to the father's house, to the door of the father's house. And the men of the city shall stone her, you guessed it, with stones, with rocks, that she die, because she hath wrought folly in Israel to play the whore in her father's house. So shalt thou put away evil from among you. So if you're not a virgin on your wedding night as a woman, because you can't prove if a man's a virgin or not. But if the woman is discovered to not be a virgin on her wedding night, and she's supposed to be, bludgeoning to death before her daddy. Well, her daddy's house. Doesn't say if he has to be there or not. But yeah. Yeah. Oh, and it gets even better. If a man, very next verse, if a man be found lying with a married woman, a woman married to an husband, then shall they both of them die. Both the man that layeth with the woman and the woman. So shalt thou put away evil from Israel. So you get that? If a man, doesn't say if the man is married or not. It can just be any old guy. If a man is found sleeping with a married woman, both of them, they are put to death. It does not say how. Apparently it's not as bad as losing your virginity before marriage, because, that gets you pelted to death with rocks. No, it just says they get put to death. Doesn't say if there's a punishment for a married man sleeping with a non-married woman. Only if the woman happens to be married. Because she belonged to another man. Because they have a way of treating women as property. Whether Christians want to accept it or not. This is where it comes from. This is where a lot of that attitude, the head covering, all that crap comes from. Women having to be silent in the church. This is where it originates. Verse 13. Verse 23. A little off there. If a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed unto a husband, and a man findeth her in the city. So again, this is an engaged woman. And a man finds her in the city, and lies with her. Then ye shall bring them both out unto the gate of the city, and ye shall stone them with stones that they die. The damsel, because she cried not, being in the city, and the man, because he hath humbled his neighbor's wife. So thou shalt put away evil from among you. Now, what exactly was all that? So if an engaged woman sleeps with a guy, and they catch them, both of them get stoned. Both of them dead. So, basically what we just went through in the previous verse. But this is specifically saying that it was in a city. If it's in a city and she doesn't cry out, meaning what? That it was consensual? That's not really what's said here. A lot of people will argue that that's what it is. But the problem is that in the next verse, we are kind of given a different scenario. And the thing is, when it comes to, anyone who knows anything, who has done any kind of research, who has been around the subject of forced intercourse, sometimes people, it is a commonly known thing that people are afraid to speak up. Sometimes it is simply because they are afraid, because they were threatened into silence by the attacker. Told, I'll hurt you or your family if you tell anyone, or you'll lose your job. There's, if it's like in a workplace environment, there's many different reasons why someone would not turn in the person that victimized them. It could be from sheer shock. Some people become incredibly traumatized. There are many levels and types of different trauma that one can experience from these things. And many of them translate into not telling anyone. And that is something that is not being taken into account here. And how do we know that that is kind of the background, well, maybe not the background, but the vibe, the insinuated context or insinuated subject that is happening here? Because in the very next verse, verse 25, but if a man find a betrothed damsel in the field, so out in the wild somewhere, away from the city, away from other people, if a man find a betrothed damsel in the field and the man force her and lie with her, literally says right there, if the man force her and lie with her, then the man only that lay with her shall die. But unto the damsel thou shalt do nothing. There is in the damsel no sin worthy of death, for as when a man riseth against his neighbor and slayeth him, even so is this matter. The problem is that this is, so basically this is saying, if a man forces intercourse upon a engaged woman, on an engaged woman in a field away from other people, this is assuming that the woman isn't shocked into not saying anything, isn't threatened into not saying anything, is bold enough to ignore the threats or whatever, because she cried out and no one was there. So it's like, what if it was actually consensual out there, and then she turns around and comes back and lies? Because that happens. There are bad people on both sides. There are women that take advantage of men. So, what if that occurs here? Because no one was there to save her. It's interesting that God somehow knows that there was no one there to save her, but couldn't do anything about it himself. And then there's no consideration for the fact that their mouth may have been covered when they were in the city, and that they were threatened. They were threatened maybe with a knife, or with who knows what else. Could have been by a powerful person in the city. Said, you tell on me and you get me in trouble, I'll make sure your whole family suffers. Like, that sort of stuff happens. And then the woman has to choose, okay, am I gonna tell on what happened and put my whole family in danger? Or am I gonna wait until my wedding night for it to be found out that I'm not a virgin and then I die anyways, but at least my family will be safe? That's a really messed up position to have to put someone in, because the woman doesn't feel safe going to anyone. This is a very messed up concept altogether. You got to admit. And as if that wasn't bad enough, it gets even worse. So this whole time, ever since verse 21, oh no, sorry, since verse 22, we've been talking about women who were engaged to be married to other men. We have nothing so far of, women doing this to engaged men. Just an interesting observation there. It's only, the punishments are only really aimed one way, in one direction. So what if the woman is not engaged? We'll back up. What if the woman is not a virgin? Well, we don't know. We have absolutely nothing on women who are not virgins. We are not told how they are allowed to be treated. We are not told what is to happen if they are treated this way, if they are single. There's really nothing. There's really nothing given about non-virgins and how they are meant to be treated in society. Unattached non-virgins. I don't know if they're up for grabs. I don't know, there's literally nothing in the Bible about what's to be done with single non-virgin women. Except when it comes to capturing people, then sometimes there are some of the people being executed. But in Israeli society, nothing is mentioned on what to do with them. But we will talk about, because we do have a rule on what to do with a non-engaged virgin. Because virginity is so damn important to Yahweh that it is literally to die for. But in this case, no one has to die. Whoop-de-doo. What happens? Well, and this is the only situation we have. You see, we had multiple situations on a married woman and a married virgin before, but we only get one situation with a virgin who is not engaged, not attached to a man. Verse 28, if a man find a damsel that is a virgin, which is not betrothed, and lay hold on her, and lie with her, and they be found. Now, it's not really clear here because of how it's worded. And lay hold on her, does that mean he forced her? They're not using that word here like they used before, so we aren't really sure. But laying hold on her, that does, to me and to a lot of people, that does sound pretty forward. That sounds pretty forceful. And only if they are found, because that's a big deal. And if they be found. What is to happen? What is the punishment for sleeping with an unattached virgin? Because there is a punishment for it. And without clarity of whether it was consensual or not. So what is the punishment? Well, the man has to pay a fine of 50 shekels. Remember the fine that the guy had to pay earlier just for lying about his wife being a virgin? He had to pay 100 shekels. Double. Just for accusing his wife of not being a virgin, his newlywed of not being a virgin. But this guy, who may or may not have forced himself on an unattached virgin, only has to pay half of that. Oh, and one more thing. And she shall be his wife, because he has humbled her. And one more thing. He may not put her away all his days. Can't divorce her, ever. Yeah. So it's not clear if it was forced. But whether it was or not, she is supposed to marry him as part of the punishment and never be divorced from him. A handful of women might say, oh, well, that's the perfect opportunity for me to torture him for the rest of his life for putting me in that situation. But most women would not be cool with that. Most women would not be down for being forced to marry their victimizer. And, you know, when you look at the whole chapter overall, oh yeah, there's a little bit more. A little bit of positive advice at the end. Verse 30, just thrown in here. A man shall not take his father's wife. Great. Basically saying don't sleep with your mother. Can't argue with that. Nor discover his father's skirt. Basically, don't... that could either be don't look at your father naked or don't get jiggy with your father. Either way, I am approving of this verse in giving good advice. But when you zoom out and look at the whole thing, the entire chapter, notice the difference just between of how God has people treat nature versus how he has them treat other people. Remember what he said about the birds? Take the young, take the chicks, leave the mother, because that's good luck. Don't mix the different kinds of plants, because it's going to defile the ground. Oh, but when it comes to virgins, yeah, make sure they get married off to the person that forces themselves on them. Oh, unless and unless they're not virgins already, and you find out on their wedding night, then drag them in front of their dad's house and pelt them to death. This is some hypocritical shit here. Literally better treatment for the environment and for animals than for other humans. Even their own kind. Because these are Israeli women we're talking about here. Yeah. We all need a hit after that one. And that is probably... I mean, I can't say it's the worst because of the other verses we've come across. I mean, come on. I mean, look at this collection I've got. I got a bunch of different references just on genocide. Slavery, different chunks of that. Sexism, well, I mean, yeah, that was pretty much the subject we covered today. And yeah, I've already gotten written in this. You can see how big of a list that is. So yeah, I don't want to say it's the worst, but it's definitely up there. Like, how can you really say which of these is the worst because of how crazy they are? Religious intolerance. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different references on that. Religious intolerance. Race-based treatment. Technically child abuse. Actually, well, no, I do have straight up child abuse. That's actually going to have to be, well, I mean, fuck, I could just mention it right now. Why not? Because at this point, we've already been through them all, of the ones that I've seen personally. We've had the Exodus 21, verse 7, about selling daughters. And then we just had the chapter in the previous episode, Deuteronomy chapter 21, 18 through 21, about murdering your own child legally. And then there is another one that is even, like, if this doesn't spell it out anymore, I don't know what does. But Proverbs 23, verses 13 and 14. I was actually made to quote Proverbs 23:14 as a child before getting beaten when I got spanked. And yeah, the verse itself, chapter 14, it literally says, "Thou shalt beat him with the rod and shalt deliver his soul from hell." And I had actually forgotten, what was the context of that? Was that just referring to slaves, perhaps? But no, it's not. Verse 13, it literally says it. If you beat your child with the rod, they won't die. That's roughly how it's put. But you can look it up for yourself. It's there. Yes. So, yes, all these things. Oh, yeah, and of course, homophobia. Yeah, which I only include those main 3 verses. But yeah, homophobia, child abuse, race-based treatment, religious intolerance, sexism, slavery, and genocide. Yeah, it's a great book. Such a holy book. So I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I will see you for the next one when I get to it. Until then, stay safe, my friends, and farewell.